Okay. Welcome, everybody. It's my pleasure to welcome you to Peng's thesis defense. I'll take a minute to introduce him. I still remember my first conversation with Peng. He showed me over Zoom, I believe, but this massive quadrotor he had built. It was gasoline powered, 10 kilograms or something like this, like don't go near it, right? And it was just immediately clear that this is a guy who knows how to make things work. And then from there, we had some really, really good conversations well before he came about dexterous hands and how control doesn't handle dexterous hands yet. And we agreed that that was going to be a focus for the thesis. When he came to MIT, the first technical nugget we decided to focus on, I guess I found it here on the slide here, was thinking about the fact that a lot of the control through contact work we had been thinking about through the years had not exploited any extra structure that might come from quasi-static models, which were suitable for a lot of manipulation. And so we set as an initial goal saying, is there extra power, extra structure available in these quasi-static models that somehow changes the optimization landscape, makes control through contact a little easier? And that's turned into a very long and nuanced conversation, which you're going to hear a lot about today. And I think we'd both say we're just in the first chapter of a really interesting story there. So I have lots of stories about Peng from over the years, but I think maybe one of my most enduring memories of him, and I'm looking actually, there's only a few people that will really know what I'm talking about here, but over the summer, last summer, we did a retreat and we went to a lake, and Peng was very excited about doing stand-up paddleboarding, and he had said, "I've never done this before, but I really want to try." And I'll admit he looked very uncomfortable on the paddleboard, but there was this expression of just pure joy that you put out that was just so endearing. I thought you were never going to come off the paddleboard. He was just happy as a clam out there. But in that particular retreat, it was not possible to stay on a paddleboard for very long because of another new piece of RLG lore, which is the thing called a jack attack. Which meant that there was an upper limit on how long anybody could stand on a paddleboard. Anyways, it's been a great few years. I would say the last thing I'll say is fast forwarding to basically today. Peng sent a draft of his thesis, just not in plenty of time, and I've been reading it. And I have to say the experience of reading his thesis has been just really amazing to me. I think it's beautifully done, beautifully written, extremely thoughtful. But for me, I feel almost obsolete because I sit there and I'm marking up the thesis and I would say, oh, wouldn't this be a great time to say, and I'd write a little side comment. And then I'd read the next sentence of, okay, he already said that, And that happened so many times when I was looking at his thesis that I laughed out loud to myself and I sat back and I was just a little bit as joyful as I think Peng was on that stuff. So it's been a joy to have you here. I hope everybody can sit back and enjoy in the same way your defense.
Thank you, Russ, for the very kind intro. Let me set up the microphone. And I'll get started. Can people hear me fine in the room? Good. Okay, so the topic of my thesis is contact-rich planning for robotic manipulation using quasi-static contact models. So as you can see from the word cloud of my thesis, I tried very hard to get robots to make a lot of contacts. I think our algorithm is going to work on complex systems, but in today's talk, I'll try to convey as much intuition as possible with simple systems with boxes, okay, boxes here, and balls. Okay, first off, okay, sorry. Why do we care about contact-rich manipulation? Why do we care about contact-rich manipulation? So if we look at how most robots are working today, they are artificially divided into this small end-effector that's responsible for making all of the contacts. And then there's a giant arm that's just staying collision-free, which seems extremely wasteful and unnatural. And if you compare that with how humans interact with objects, we do things very differently. We do not only use our hands, we also use our arms and body to make contact with the object that we are handling. So this allows us to interact with objects that are a lot larger than what our hands can hold. So if robots can do the same, they would be able to handle objects that they cannot hold in their end effectors as well. So this would allow us to have small form factor robots that live around humans and operate in a way that that seems safer. And that is not the end of the story. We could also imagine shrinking the size of the table to the size of the palm and shrink the robot arms into individual fingers. And then the same contact-rich planning algorithm that we use for whole arm or whole body manipulation can also be used on the dexterous hand. But why has contact-rich planning been difficult? I think the root cause is the non-smoothness in contact dynamics, and I'll explain what we mean by the contact dynamics being non-smooth and what trouble it causes, hopefully with the simple example with just a 1D ball and a 1D box. So from here onwards, we'll use QU to denote the position of the box. Here U stands for unactuated, and we'll use QA to denote the position of the ball, which is actuated. And we will also use U to denote the control input. And we would assume that the robot is controlled by some impedance controller with some stiffness and some damping. Okay, so what does the plot of the dynamics look like? So here I have prepared a live hardware demo with a box and a ball. So if you're not pushing the box and just moving the ball around, the box would not respond to the commanded position of the ball. And the box would only respond when the ball is actually touching the box. Okay. And here I have a demo showing that in action. I'm plotting the position of the box against the commanded position of the ball. And yeah, before the ball makes contact with the box just stands still, and it only moves when contact is established. And as we can see, the dynamics itself looks like a ReLU, which has a discontinuous gradient. And that's going to cause trouble when we try to accomplish certain tasks, such as we want to move the ball to the right from where it currently is to QU go. I mean, we as humans, we know that we need to push on the box with the ball to move the ball, but to tell the computer to do it, we need to write it down in a way that it can understand. And the most common way to do this is through this framework called optimal control, where we try to minimize the distance between the goal and where the box is after an action is taken. And the most common way to solve this optimization problem is with some local optimization methods, such as gradient descent, where we move in the opposite direction against the gradient of the objective function. So here, if I write down the gradient with the chain rule, you'll see that the derivative of the dynamics comes into play. And if we use the exact gradient of the exact dynamics in this optimization, we would have a problem, because whenever the ball is not touching the box, which is mostly the case, we would have a gradient that's exactly 0, which tells us nothing about how we should move the ball in order to touch the box. In fact, this has been a long-standing problem in robot motion planning that people have already come up with a nice solution to this problem. And that solution is smoothing. So we can imagine introducing a force field between the ball and the box so that the box can be touched by the ball before they even establish contact. Sorry, I cannot demonstrate that with this setup, but I can show that in simulation. So here is what it looks like. You can see the ball is the box is starting to move even before the ball touches it. And the amount of pushing gets larger and larger as the ball gets closer and closer to the box. So this would give us a smoothed version of the originally non-smooth dynamics, which has non-zero gradient when there's no contact. And as a result of this positive gradient, if we do gradient descent now, the gradient would indeed tell us to move the ball to the right in order to touch the box, and thereby moving the box to the right as well. But what if we want to move the box to the left? If we again follow the gradient would simply tell us to move the ball to the left. And if the ball starts on the left of the box, it would simply keep moving right without ever moving left without ever touching it. And that's problematic because because it would never touch the box. And this is a case where I think local search algorithm gets stuck in local minima, which is fairly common in local search methods. And we as humans, we know that we need to move the ball to the right of the box before moving the ball to the left again to touch it. But for local search methods, that kind of action usually increases the cost before starting to decrease the cost again. And as a result of that, it is usually not able to find actions like that. So we need some mechanism to do a more global search. And usually the way to organize this search is through this thing called contact modes. So for the simple system, there are 4 contact modes. So the first one is the ball is on the left, not touching, ball on the left touching, and ball on the right touching, and ball on the right not touching. So the dynamics of the system in each one of these modes is relatively simple, in this case linear, and therefore we can just solve the optimal control problem for every one of these modes and pick a solution with the lowest cost. But this method has a problem, which is that the number of modes grows very quickly with the number of degrees of freedom or the complexity of the system in general. So in this case, if we allow the box to rotate freely and move freely in the 2D plane, and we consider friction between the box and the ball, we would have 16 modes. Well, the ball can make contact with each of the face of the box, and for each face, the ball can be touching, not touching, sliding to the left, or sliding to the right. And we get to something that's even more complex, such as the dexterous hands. We have a number that's absolutely astronomical, that it's basically hopeless to think through how we would transition from one mode to another. I think this hints that we need a method that's fundamentally different from reasoning about mode transitions. Okay, hopefully I have convinced you that for contact-rich planning to work on the scale of dexterous hands, we need both global planning and smooth dynamics. But if you look at the literature of existing methods, we have people have either done local search with smooth dynamics, which can scale to really high-dimensional systems like humanoids and the planar ostrich, or people have done mode switches for global search. And people have also tried to trade off between how global optimal you are and how much compute you do. But I think it's fair to say that whenever we think about modes explicitly, we are stuck with systems that are relatively simple. I think this plot leaves the upper right corner open, which is where our method is going to lie. So we will propose a method that takes the best from both worlds, where we combine global planning that is informed by a smooth version of the dynamics, the contact dynamics. Okay, a literature review would not be complete without talking about reinforcement learning. I think RL has produced some of the best and most convincing hardware demos with dexterous manipulation. But I mean, the way it's done right now leaves a lot more to be desired. For example, they require a heavy amount of offline computation. In the NVIDIA case, it took 60 hours on their beefy machine to get the policy. And after you get this policy, it is very difficult to generalize the policy to different tasks. For example, the same policy that's used to rotate the cube, you cannot really use it to open the door. Nevertheless, it's undeniable that RL has solved a very difficult problem that model-based methods have been struggling with, and we would really like to understand how it does it. And my co-author, Terry, has thought a lot about this problem. And our hypothesis is that in RL's effort to avoid local minimum, it does a lot of sampling that has a smoothing effect on the dynamics. And therefore, if we could do smoothing without sampling, we may be able to achieve the same level of performance RL without incurring the computational cost of RL. Okay, before talking more about the technical details of our planner, let me show you what it can do. So here, all these plans are generated by our planner. This is showing a visualization of the plan using the quasi-static dynamics, which I have yet to introduce. And this is, box pushing, and this is something that's more complex. We have a dexterous hand opening the door, a dexterous hand picking up a book, a dexterous hand trying to align the pen with the target frame, and finally a dexterous hand that's rotating a box in hand. A ball in hand. Okay, it's going to take a while. One thing to note here is that there's a lot of repositioning of the fingers to get better grasp on the object in order to keep rotating it. And all of these plans are generated on a laptop with about 1 minute of online compute. And here we are showing that the plans generated are indeed contact rich. So the colors indicate the contact forces between the hand and the object. And as you can see, a lot of the different parts of the hand are activated during the execution of the plan. Okay, and this also works on hardware as well. So here we are trying to rotate the bucket by 180 degrees. And here's the action that we are particularly fond of, where, as the bucket starts off on the hand of the arm here and rolls onto a hook that's formed by the arm. Yeah, here it's showing that the bucket is indeed rotated by 180. Okay. Yeah, summary of our contributions. So we proposed a contact-rich planner that can generate plans for complex systems involving dexterous hands and on hardware with just about 1 minute of online compute on a laptop. In contrast, I think RL-based methods needs tens of hours of offline compute on a beefy workstation to get a functional policy. And our planner is enabled by a novel contact dynamics model, which is quasi-static, convex, differentiable, and that is also amenable to smoothing, which, we have argued that is essential to the success of contact-rich planning. And with the help of this model, we proposed a sampling-based global search algorithm, that's going to be guided by this model. So first off, I'll talk a little bit about how the contact model works. There will be some equations in this section. I'll get over it very soon. So first off, what do we mean by the dynamics being quasi-static? So by dynamics, we mean a discrete time version of the dynamics that tells you where the object is at the next time step from the current object configuration and the action. And by the system being quasi-static, we mean that the velocity is so small that the inertial forces and Coriolis forces can be ignored during the entire process. And as a result of that, velocity is not part of the state. We only have configuration, hence Q instead of X in the dynamics. And as I showed in the simple ball and box example, we divide the system configuration into an actuated part corresponding to the robot and an unactuated part corresponding to the objects. And we will use U again to denote the commanded position of the robot, which is usually impedance controlled with some stiffness. Here, damping disappears because everything is quasi-static. And we will also use delta Q from time to time to denote the difference between the next configuration and the current configuration. And we'll use H to denote the step size. So it may come up from time to time as well. Okay, so on the right is a simple example of what the quasi-static system might look like. So in addition to the ball and the box, we now have two walls on the left and right of the entire system. And to model contact, we need contact forces, which are denoted by lambdas. And we need distances between different contact pairs, which are denoted by phis. So here we have 3 contact pairs, one between the object and the robot, one between the robot and the wall, and one between the object and the wall. And these variables that we have defined so far need to satisfy the constraint of physics. In this case, we need the object to stay, the robot needs to stay in force balance, and so is the object. And there cannot be any penetration between any of the objects and the walls. So for any contact pair indexed by I, there cannot be any penetration. And contact forces can only push on objects. They cannot pull objects towards you. And last but not least, you can only push on objects when you're in contact. And this is a set of classic constraints to model contacts. And it turns out that this set of constraints is equivalent to the optimality condition of a quadratic program. So if you solve this, it is equivalent to, if you solve this to optimality, this is equivalent to satisfying this set of constraints. And after you solve this, you can simply add the solution to the current configuration to get the next configuration. Okay. So why do we care about quasi-static dynamics? I mean, first off, we only need to deal with a state space that's half as large as a second order system, because we throw away V and only deal with Q. But an often overlooked benefit of quasi-static dynamics is in the temporal side of things, where by ignoring the transients that's introduced by these dampers, spring dampers, we can look ahead a lot further by taking fewer steps. So here I'm showing this extremely simple second order system with mass, spring, and damper. And if you were to model second order dynamics, you would have to take many steps before you can reach the equilibrium. But if you're dealing with a quasi-static version of the dynamics, you reach the equilibrium in one step. And usually it can save you a tremendous amount of compute, not tremendous, I mean some amount of compute when you are formulating the planning problem. And also, many manipulation tasks are indeed quasi-static. They are dominated by friction and contact forces instead of the Coriolis forces and inertia forces. So this is a very good example of what a quasi-static system is. So whenever I push something, it moves, and when I'm not pushing it, it doesn't move. So that's the operational definition of what quasi-static can mean. Okay. Okay, but the formulation we just brought up on the previous slide needs a little bit more thought. So here you can see that the objective function is only positive semi-definite, because there is no cost on the delta Q U terms. So this means if I were to solve it, the box is able to stay anywhere between where the robot is and the right wall. And this reminds us of solving least square problems where we have a null space. And the solution in those cases is to add a small amount of regularization. And we can also do the same here for our quasi-static dynamics. And the effect of this regularization is that among all the possible positions of the box, I want the solver to return me one that moves the least. And if we were to pick this regularization constant that's equal to the mass divided by the step size, this would give you Matt Mason's classical definition of quasi-dynamic systems. But in general, we can pick the regularization in a way that reflects how heavy or how much resistance the robot faces when it's pushing the object. Okay, so far we've been talking about simple systems, and we've shown that they can be formulated as a convex program. But for more general systems that are frictionless, with many contacts as many states, the dynamics is still a convex program, although it looks a little bit bigger. You don't have to worry about the details of the terms in the equation. I just want to show the quadratic form that appears in the objective. and the linear constraints that's in the cost, and the linear constraints. And if we want to model friction, it turns out that Anitascu has proposed a nice relaxation or convex approximation of the Coulomb friction constraints, so that instead of having these inequality constraints, you have a cone constraints that's still convex. And this would allow you to solve for general systems with contact and friction. Okay, since the problem itself is convex, we can make use of existing techniques that differentiate through convex programs to get the gradient of the next system configuration with respect to the current configuration and the action. I mean, the standard way to do it is by applying the implicit function theorem to the active constraints at optimality. And many simulators, differentiable simulators, indeed take this approach. The thing to note here is that what you get from this differentiation is the gradient of the non-smooth dynamics. Remember the ReLU that I showed earlier? So if you do this, it would give you either 0 or 1. But with the gradient computed from differentiable simulators, we can smooth them using first-order randomized smoothing. But randomized smoothing requires sampling. And for systems with contact, there is a more efficient way to do the smoothing, which we call analytic smoothing. Yeah, we have shown that for this system, this is the same system with 3 contacts. We can formulate the dynamics as a QP here, which is equivalent to a set of KKT conditions that describes the physics of the system. And it turns out that we can also do a non-constrained version of the same QP, where we shovel the constraints into the cost with an indicator function that is 0 when the constraints are satisfied and goes up to infinity when the constraints are violated. There is a simple way to smooth the system, which is to introduce the same force field between the object and the robot. So, and that is done by relaxing the complementarity constraints on the last row here to something that's non-zero. So this is saying I can push on the object with the robot with the force that's inversely proportional to that's inversely proportional to the distance between the 2 objects. And the amount of smoothing is controlled by this parameter kappa. Okay. And not surprisingly, this set of constraints is also the optimality condition of another non-smoothed convex optimization program, which has a log barrier for the constraints instead of the indicator function. So the log barrier, of course, is the smooth version of the indicators, and interior point methods to solve convex programs typically use this technique to iteratively approach the optimal solution of the original non-smooth problem. But we can terminate early with a small kappa to achieve the effect of smoothing. Okay, for general systems, the thought process is still the same. The only difference is that instead of having a log for the inequality constraints, we now have a generalized log for the cones. The resulting optimization program just looks longer, but it's still the same. And it's unconstrained, it's convex, it can be solved with interior point methods, it is differentiable, it will provide us with smoothed gradients, which we can use to do contact-rich planning. Okay, from here onwards, I'll use the subscript rho to denote the dynamics that's indeed smooth, that's smoothed. Okay, so now we are ready to move on to talk about global sampling-based contact-rich planning using this quasi-static model. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, local search methods can give pretty good results when there's no local minima to avoid. So in this case, we can rotate the ball with the hand by 30 degrees just fine, using just gradient descent with the gradient computed from the quasi-static dynamics. But what if we want to rotate it by 180 degrees? You can see that in this process, the hand reconfigures itself to get better grasps on the object from time to time in order to keep rotating the ball. And this kind of reconfiguration usually incurs some cost on the control action. And that means that, yeah, I said this before, but I'll say this again. Cost will go up before they can start to go down again. And this is very adversarial for local search methods that tries to always go downhill on the cost. And as a result of that, we need something that looks more globally for a solution, and sampling-based motion planning has been known to be very good at this global exploration. So I think a lot of you are familiar with RT, but let me just quickly show what it is for the benefit of those who are not. So in this simple example, RT is doing configuration space planning. The red boxes are obstacles. The robot starts here in the center, and it tries to go to this magenta go region. And RT does its exploration by building a tree iteratively that fills up the entire configuration space. In this simple example, you can see that it finds a solution very quickly. In this 23 seconds video, it finds a solution at the first second. Yeah. As more samples are collected, it fills up the state space or the configuration space more and more densely. So in a typical iteration of RT, so here I draw the box as the configuration space of the robot. So this is the tree that we have at the current iteration of RT. This is the root. These are the nodes. And at the typical iteration, we would sample a subgoal from the configuration space, and then we would compute the distance from every node in the tree to the subgoal, and pick the one that's closest to the subgoal to grow the tree from. And in this case, since the subgoal itself is collision-free, we can simply add it to the tree. But there is a problem when there are dynamics constraints on the system. So in this simple example of the car, it is very easy for the car to move forward, but almost impossible to move it sideways. So although these two configurations are the same distance to where the car currently is, according to the global Euclidean metric, their dynamic reachability implies that their actual distance needs to be vastly different. Therefore, we need to answer the question, so how do we measure dynamic reachability under the contact dynamics constraint? And our solution is a distance metric that's based on the smooth linearization of the contact dynamics, of the quasi-static contact dynamics. To recall that we have shown that we can indeed smooth the contact dynamics, and this subscript row denotes that the thing has been smoothed. And our goal is to compute a distance metric for a node that's currently in the tree, denoted by the bar. Okay, we use what we call a smooth input linearization, which tells us where the system can get to with a small perturbation from the nominal robot configuration. And since we are mostly concerned about moving the object from one configuration to another configuration, we can just take the rows of the first equation corresponding to the object. And then we can define our distance metric, which looks like an ellipsoid, where the shape of the ellipsoid is defined by BB transpose, and the center is defined by just the evaluation of the function value from the nominal configuration. And the epsilon sub-level set of this distance metric is indeed an ellipsoid. A different way to look at this is that we take a unit ball in the action space, and we transform the unit ball through the B matrix into the space of object configuration. And there are certain directions in which the ball is elongated, that those are directions that are easy to reach. And there are certain directions which are contracted, and those are directions that are harder to reach. And we also propose a slightly different way to visualize the new tree where each node has a distance metric. So now, instead of drawing the box as the entire configuration space, we are only drawing the box as the configuration space of the objects. And for every node, because there's also the configuration of the robot, we can compute the distance metric for each individual node, for each node. Okay. Now I'm ready to show like what it looks like. So here, okay, let me first explain what's on the screen. So on the right is the visualization of the box, no box, of the ball and planar hand system. And on the left is the tree in the object configuration space that I just described. So the horizontal axis are the translational degrees of freedom of the ball, and the vertical axis is the rotational degrees of freedom of the ball. So the goal here is to rotate the ball by 180, so which means, yeah, as you can see, the root starts at angle equals 0, and the goal is up here with theta equals pi. And I can hover on these nodes, which will draw the configuration of the system on the right. Yeah, let me first show you what a pass look like. So I can show a pass to any of the nodes by just clicking on it. Let me replay it. Yeah, that looks pretty convincing. And I mean, this kind of tree is what you want when you are a motion planner that's trying to grow a tree that fills up the configuration space. I mean, it uniformly explores all directions, fills up it nicely. And if we zoom in, we'll see that each node has its own ellipsoid, which is its distance metric. And the color of the ellipsoids denote their volume. So a redder one means that it has a larger volume, and the blue one means that it has a smaller volume. So if we rotate around, we can see that these blue ones are almost flat in certain directions, which means they will be considered as far away from almost any other configuration. And if we look at what these configurations with bad distance metric look like, they usually correspond to configurations where the robot is not really touching the object. In contrast, if we look at these ones where the distance metric is good, is red, we almost see a good grasp with the robot on the object. Okay, yeah, these good ones have good grasps. And these blue ones usually do not correspond to configurations with contact. Okay. Okay, here's, yeah, just to reiterate what I showed in the demo with nicer graphics. So for this configuration, the nominal configuration is shown in black, and the distance metric is shown over here as the red ellipsoid. So B1 and B2 are two configurations that are equidistant to the nominal configuration according to the global Euclidean metric. But they are, but B1 is apparently a lot closer than B2 according to the local metric. And as shown here, and intuitively, it is clear that it's a lot easier to move the ball to the red configuration than to the pink configuration. Yeah, another thing I mentioned is that usually good distance metrics correspond to configurations with contact. Here, as I move the robot further and further away, you can see that the distance metric shrinks from a large, nice ellipsoid to something that's almost invisible. So there's a little bit of blue in the center, corresponding to the blue configuration of the robot. All right, so far we have shown that with the help of the distance metric, we can better tell the distance from the subgoal to the tree. So here, if we were to use the global metric, this would be the closest node. But because we have individual metrics for individual nodes, this is now closest to the subgoal. And after picking the closest nodes from the tree, we will compute a small action that takes us a bit closer towards the subgoal. And we compute this action by solve a small optimal control problem. That uses the smooth linearization of the dynamics. And here we only take small steps because we know that the smooth linearization is only valid locally. And we call this dynamically consistent extension, which means, yeah, the rollout here is consistent with the non-smooth version of the dynamics. But if we were, there's a catch here. So if we were to do this, we would only be making small changes to the robot configuration. And yeah, as I said here on the bottom, this is against the very spirit of RT, which requires us to sample uniformly in the configuration space of both the object and the robot. So, and the consequence of doing only this, I have a different tree. So this tree has the same number of nodes as the one here. But you can see that, yeah, it tries, but it falls short of reaching, it falls short of reaching the goal by a wide margin. Because, yeah, if we were to look at this tree, I'm going to hover on it, slide over the tree for you to see what it looks like. The robot configuration changes by a small amount from node to node. This is the exact reason why it's stuck, because, yeah, because we are not looking at the different ways in which robots can be interacting with the object. And to solve that problem, we introduce a new trick called context sampling, where instead of trying to connect to the subgoal at every iteration, we pick one of the nodes from the tree and try to get a different way to for the robot to grasp the object. And that will give us, for this node, and this is the node that we picked, a new distance metric. So now with the new distance metric, this is the closest node to the subgoal. And we can make the connection from there. And yeah, you might have noticed that in the demo I showed earlier, there are nodes, object configurations with multiple ellipsoids. So this is exactly what happens when you do context sampling. So I can hover my mouse. So for this object configuration, this ellipsoid corresponds to one way to grasp it. This is another way to grasp it. And yeah, the same is true for many of the other nodes. Okay.
So one quick question on that example that you showed. What's the difference between that in one configuration the 4 links are in contact versus the other one only 2 links are in contact? Or was it more subtle than that?
No, it's not more subtle than that. It's just yeah, we have 2 ways to sample contacts. One is for the robot to hug the object, and the other is to grasp it with the end effector. Okay, yeah, with this trick, we are now able to explore globally the configuration space of both the robot and the object. And okay. And just a quick note on how we implemented context sampler. Yeah, it is system specific. As I said in my answer to Alberto's question, for the planar hand system, we can either solve AKA for individual hands or fingers, or try to hug the object. For the dexterous hand, what we did was that we sample a random direction in the configuration space of the hand, and then try to close the hand until it touches the object. Well, this can be improved vastly with better techniques to do it. But the important thing here is that we need context sampling to achieve good exploration. So yeah, here's a summary of the modifications to RT that we proposed to make context sampling, context-rich planning work. First one is a distance metric that tells you the nearest node according to reachability. And the second one is context sampling, which allows global exploration of the configuration space of both the object and the robot. And the last one is dynamic consistent extension, which makes sure that the path we get from RT satisfies the quasi-static dynamics. And here's just to reiterate what I showed with the demo with a system that I can plot on the plane. So in the first row is what you would get with an RT that has all of these three modifications. As you can see, we can grow a tree that fills up the space nicely and find a path to the goal. So on the second row is an ablation study where we just remove one of these components and compare the shape of the tree. As you can see, without any of these, we get a tree that's stuck locally close to where it started. All right, so next, I'll talk about how these actually transfer to, oh, sure. Oh, sure, sure.
Have you seen anything where, like, you know, is there a task that you've seen where you might have a large radius of something that could have a large delta based on, you know, where you're going? That would maybe like trick this into doing something a little bit more chaotic. Does that make sense?
Wait, by having a large radius, you mean the node is considered close to every other node? If you have an ellipsoid with extremely large radius, then every other node will try to connect to it. I haven't really seen that, but I mean, if that is indeed the case, then the planning problem should be relatively simple.
So like, yeah, just trying to think
Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah, we've shown that we can do planning pretty nicely with this quasi-static dynamics, but how well does it transfer to a more realistic second-order simulator or even hardware? The answer is mixed. Okay, let me show you what I mean. Because of the existence of inertia in second-order systems, there is always some difference between a quasi-static version of the system and the second-order version of the system. And that manifests as the robot lagging behind, the object lagging behind when the object is being pushed, or the object getting in front of the plan when the object decelerates. Ooh. Let me keep playing. And that is most clearly shown with the planar pushing example. So yeah, it starts off lagging and then gets ahead of the plan. But the consequence of having this discrepancy is not always disastrous. I think in cases where, okay. Yeah, in cases where the quasi-static assumption is indeed satisfied, by which I mean, if I'm not touching the box, it's not moving, then this error between second order and the quasi-static dynamics mostly causes harmless oscillations between the real trajectory. Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah, this mostly causes harmless oscillations between the real trajectory and the actual trajectory. And that can be shown with one of these hardware examples. I think the bucket indeed stays in place when the robot is touching it. And therefore, we can just open loop execute our plan and it works pretty well. But there are other cases where the object doesn't stop moving when the robot doesn't touch it. For example, this ball, if I'm holding it like this, I mean, it stands still in my hand. But if I put this on the table, it's going to roll by itself. And yeah, that is indeed a problem that we see in simulation as well. So if there are no fingers to stop the ball from rolling, there can be fairly large tracking errors, or the ball can even just roll off the palm. Yeah, I mean, the hand can also drop the box. So, okay. Oh, yeah, this motivates us to think more about both robust planning, where we have robot configurations that make sure that the quasi-static assumption is always satisfied, and stabilization of this plan, where we use feedback to make sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen. So what's next for context-rich planning, manipulation, control? I think for model-based planning for complex systems, there's a common theme of a hierarchy of models that starts at the lower resolution that looks further ahead, and then there are higher resolution models that tells you more detail. So this is the case for locomotion, where I think the low resolution model is the centroidal dynamics of flying potatoes. And I mean, that's indeed what they call it. And when we need to think about the robot itself, yeah, we add in the full body kinematics in the higher resolution model. So in thermodynamics, we have these PV diagrams that are also designed by the ideal gas law, which is also quasi-static. But on the real system, especially the combustion process, it's definitely not quasi-static. So to make sure that the combustion looks like what it shows up on the plot, the engineers need to think very hard about how to like spray the petrol inside the combustion chamber, how to ignite it so that the heat, I mean, it's a lot of effort to make sure that the second order dynamics, or not even second order, the dynamics of the true gas matches up with the quasi-static version that's on the simple plot. And for context-rich manipulation, maybe quasi-static contact dynamics is a nice low-resolution model. And for the high-resolution model, it could be full second-order dynamics. It can be second-order centroidal dynamics. It can be something else. But hopefully, our work on quasi-static simulation for context-rich planning has shed some light on how we should approach this problem using a model-based perspective, and makes the questions that we need to answer a bit more clear. And that's the end of the technical part of the presentation. Now I need to thank people. First of all, I'd like to thank Russ. I think Russ has been, I've been thinking about creative ways to thank Russ. Yeah, and I'll go with metaphors. So Russ has been an almost oracular reward function. While I'm navigating the landscape of robotic research. Russ, being a reward function, it's very tricky to balance exploitation and exploration, right? I feel that reward is sparse enough that I'm almost always doing whatever I like to do, but also dense enough that I can stand here eventually to defend my thesis. I have another one. So, all right. I think Russ's rigorous attitude towards research, towards teaching, towards writing code, towards barefoot running, makes him an ideal expert policy to imitate. I can go on with these metaphors, but it turns out that whatever I think about, Russ plays an important role in these learning paradigms. So thank you, Russ, for giving me this opportunity to learn from you. And I'd also like to thank my committee members, Tomas and Alberto, for giving me constructive feedback on the thesis, and also pointing me to different areas where there are relative work, but those are places that I'm not super familiar with. I would also like to thank the lab mates of the robot locomotion group for all the conversations, lunches, dinners, beers, and laughters and jokes. Especially, I'd like to thank my co-author, Terry, who has, it's very rare to meet someone who shares the same research interests as you. And Terry, in addition to being like an extremely talented and knowledgeable researcher, he's also a source of joy, not only for me, but for all of us in the lab. Terry and I both work with Joe Burdick in Caltech. And when I told Joe that Terry is going to join the same group as me, The word that Joe used to describe Terry is happy. So thank you, Terry, for, in addition to all the cool work that you have done, for being a source of happiness for all of us. And I also like to thank my parents, and this is me when I was smaller, for just bringing me to this world, raising me up to be hopefully a decent human being. And I'd also like to thank my wife for always being there for me, for loving me, for caring for me, and for whenever I feel like that I'm a useless reinforcement learning agent stuck with a bad policy, she's there to remind me that there's more to life than collecting rewards. All right. Yeah, that's all I have. Thank you. I'll take questions from here.
So we can take questions from the room. We can take questions from, I see some friends on Zoom. That's awesome. Anybody's welcome. We will have an open session with everybody first, and then we'll have a closed session with the faculty after. Can you hear people? Yeah.
Oh. Was I sharing my screen? Oh, sure. Well, I mean,
Pang,
sure,
could
sure,
you
sure.
repeat the
I think
questions?
Max was
Because,
asking
we
what
can't
is
hear.
the best way to interface between the high and low resolution models. So one way that I can think of right now is to have, use the solution we get from the high resolution model as an initial guess to a trajectory optimization problem with the higher resolution model as constraints. There can be more creative ways and more efficient ways to do this, but yeah, that's something to look into.
So on those visualizations like that, those are really cool, but that's the projection of is that the projection of the RT of the whole system, which is the state of the ball plus the state of my hand on just the state of the ball? Or are you drawing a separate RT that in some ways connects to that one?
I think it's the first one that you described. So yeah, we are showing the projection of the tree onto the space of the object only. And the way that different robot configurations show up is by those ellipsoids. So for the same object, there can be different ways the robot is grasping it. And for every different way the robot grasps it, there is a different ellipsoid.
So when you're showing the kind of different ellipsoids, what I really have is 10 nodes, which are 10 different graphs. So the object state is the same, but the hand states are different.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, hi.
You spoke to robust controllers as a way to result some research with using quasi-static model.
Mhm.
Can you speak to the challenges associated with either generating robust plans versus coming up with robust controllers track plan?
Okay, we haven't really thought about robust control. We thought a little bit about control and robust planning. So by robust planning, I mean, we can come up with graphs or interactions in general between the robot and the object such that the the quasi-static assumption is satisfied. For example, instead of holding the ball like this, where it's very likely for it to fall off my palm, I can hold it like this. Right now, our planner doesn't really distinguish between these different kind of grasps. Hope that makes sense.
You want to read off anything from my mind or allow me?
Maybe as a question, how different is open source from moving a ball?
In terms of RT, that they are not really that different. I mean, we had a visualization of opening the door because it only has 2 degrees of freedom. You can clearly see that it's trying to push the hinge open. It's trying to push the knob open before it tries to turn the hinge. And the distance metric does a pretty good job at telling the robot to do so. Mm-hmm.
The padding approaches have to solve the padding problem online.
Mm-hmm.
Scratch time. Do you think there are ways to leverage unlimited offline compute for model-based approaches?
Oh, definitely. I think it is quite wasteful to build an RT tree from scratch every time. And our approach has revealed some structure into the problem, and certain components of that pipeline to solve the problem, I think can definitely benefit from learning. One of those is the context sampler. Right now, I mean, it's going to be fairly similar to Ken Goldberg's DexNet, where they learn how to, like, given an image of the scene, they learn how to graph one of the objects from the scene. So similarly, given the current object configuration, or maybe a nerf of it, we can just pass the nerf to a neural network that's going to give you a good grasp on the object. And that can be trained in a supervised way. And that's just one of the many ways. Or we could even learn initial guesses sorry, I didn't think that one's true, but the DexNet one is a good way to start introducing learning to this pipeline.
What if it's not learning, but just unlimited compute? You're restricting yourself to unlimited compute. What if you that you're allowed to use the GPU and unlimited resources to do, but you stayed in the model-based world? What would you do?
But I mean, but there's no such thing as unlimited compute, right? I mean, we have to worry about the climate, and we could be on Mars.
I'm not working. I'm just thinking from the case. I just learned there is a case So one question is, you have some issue with the local search, and you have to hold this local search issue. You could approach from the global search using
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way you think you can still avoid the issue of local search? But not using global search.
Okay, the question is, how can we avoid the downsides of local search without searching globally?
Yeah. So for example, you mentioned that there is no other way can avoid to explore, increase the distance in the local search. For this one, you can really spread the global search. But what if you, let's say, allow having average kind of local search, where instead of you just look at the kind of like increase in every instance, the take the average over a certain period.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think RL has been doing something similar to what you're describing. So instead of minimizing one objective, it minimizes the stochastic objective by sampling. So we have observed that doing this smoothing over objective function has certain effects on avoiding local minima. But I think we prefer philosophically an approach that searches globally more explicitly.
First, awesome talk. You're impacted with visualization on music. So his question is, do you think if you can run the quasi-dynamic pattern continuously in the fashion of MPC and assume that it can be running super fast, it could magically close the gap between quasi-dynamic to organic?
Oh, that's actually, I think, one of the most straightforward way to do control. Yeah, we can definitely do that. There's no, I think the only limitation for us to do it right now is to make it run fast enough. But we believe, I mean, Terry and I think that there can be more interesting ways to solve the problem without having to do this MPC thing, because I mean, MPC has certain drawbacks. Like you don't really know what its region of attractions are. You don't know when it's going to break down, and there's always this gap between the second order version of the dynamics and the true dynamic. The second order version of the dynamics and the quasi-static dynamics. We are thinking about something that doesn't do MPC, that is more computationally efficient, that's based entirely on local sensing of the contact patches. I think that's going to be slightly more appealing than just running MPC.
Oh, say that's partly because of the state estimation challenge.
Yes.
Right.
Oh, sure.
So in conjunction with global search or local search and things like that, have you aside from RL, I'm seeing thing in like controls like non-minimum based systems that you could apply for a little bit more of the exploration side of things.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Have you seen anything in controls for non-minimum based systems aside from RL and trajectory optimization that might be able to help in that local search without jumping sample-based global search?
I see. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert in control. I'd love to discuss this with you offline. Yeah.
I think that's great. Maybe we should transition to the closed session.
Sure.
Let's think.
Thank you, everybody that joined online. Do you have a separate Zoom set up for later, or?
We have a breakout room.
Okay. So if you-
Shen is setting that up right now. So she's going to move me and Thomas into the room.
Okay. So if other people wanted to hang out, they could. I mean, there's going to be a session in the lab upstairs later, but